Gardening is a delicate blend of art and science, and today we visit the home of a well-known portrait artist whose canvas of choice was nature. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart from Texas.
The Safer brand organic lawn care program makes house calls. By ordering online, the lawn you want can be delivered right to your door. The Safer brand organic lawn care program is a proud sponsor of public television and GardenSMART.
I should be arrested for crimes against potted plant kind. My house is where plants came to die.
Miracle Grow Potting Mix is designed to help grow big, beautiful plants. Everyone grows with Miracle Grow.
Hey there, little Red Riding Hood. You sure are looking good.
Portrait painter Douglas Chandor began designs for his home and garden in 1934. The site was originally called White Shadows and was later renamed Chandor by his wife after his death in 1953. The garden is skillfully carved out of a caliche hillside that had once been his in-laws' cow pasture, and it consists of 7 interlocking gardens with English and Japanese features. Water is a prominent component of the garden as waterfalls, fountains, and ponds wind through the property. The garden was opened to the public in 1938 and soon attracted regional attention. It was Chandor's wish that his garden would inspire Texas men to take up gardening. This garden reflects Chandor's ability to transform thought and landscape into a place of beauty. Stephen Chambly came to Chandor Gardens from the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens at the peak of his long and illustrious career as a horticulturist. Stephen has put his many years of experience to work in bringing vibrant, artistic expression to a garden and has done a masterful job of restoring Chandor Gardens to its original beauty. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to have you here at Chandor Gardens.
You know, anytime I meet a gardener or a horticulturist, I'm always interested in learning how they found their way to the amazing field of horticulture.
Well, mine was a little bit convoluted, but I ended up working for my father transplanting trees when I was 18 years old.
Wow, did you go on to study horticulture after that?
Yes, I remember that I went into, I guess the first thing I got into was Neil Sperry's book. And I read that and I realized, wow, there's a lot more about horticulture that I don't know. So I had a lawn service. I started attending Tarrant County Junior College part-time and eventually got my act together and graduated there. Went to Tarleton State University, got a bachelor's, and then I was fortunate enough to get to go to Longwood Gardens in their graduate program and earn a master's in public horticulture administration.
Well, it's a wonderful place to learn gardening.
Oh, it's a magnificent. It's the mecca of gardening.
It absolutely is. So how'd you come to Chandor?
I had a perfectly reasonable job at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden, and it was a great job, and I knew they needed somebody out here, and I'd known Chandor Gardens for a while and knew it was kind of a humble little garden, and it was at a real turning point in its existence. As far as the history of the garden, it had been abandoned once for 16 years, and a couple bought it and brought it up to speed, and then the city had bought it, and I was the first person being hired in, and I think I came here because I was concerned with the fate of the garden, and I think it's maybe I was more concerned about what would happen to the garden than what would happen to me. I've grown older and tireder since I've been here, but the garden has done very well.
Well, I understand you've done a lot of work here. Let's go take a look at it.
All right, sounds great.
I want to imagine when Douglas Chandor arrived on this site that there wasn't this beautiful shade canopy. It probably was more just a flat prairie land, right?
You're right. It was a short grass escarpment prairie, very few trees. There were mostly cedar elms here. So the trees you see planted, primarily live oaks and Shumard oaks, were planted and of course have come to fruition now 75 years later. So the shade was planted way back then, came into, and it's given us some challenges, you know, in our shade areas from the ground up, I guess, from the ground covers. Ophiopogon or Mondo grass works very well for us. Liriope, we have giant Liriope, which actually gives you a little different texture than the standard Liriopes. English ivy works very well as a ground cover, almost too well sometimes because it'll go. It'll do anything. Yes, it'll go up, it'll go down, it'll do anything. So, and for shrubs, we use Turk's cap, American beautyberry in dry areas, some Nandina. Kind of fun, I've used a little kaleidoscope Abelia off in the shadier areas because it has a bright colored foliage and greens out a little bit in the summer, but it works pretty good.
I love that.
The Cleara here, and of course we have azaleas all in the garden. We got a donation of the entire Encore azalea collection, so that was kind of fun. And so they're different colors flowering at different times, and so that works pretty well for us.
How do azaleas do in the Texas soils? Do they like it here?
Well, these aren't Texas soils. What we've done is we brought in aged pine fines and mixed a little peat moss in with them. Right. So basically we've mounded up and recreated. And actually Douglas Chandor, he did the opposite. He got big lead liners and filled them full of peat moss.
Oh, wow.
And in different places. So it's kind of interesting that that's one reason I wanted azaleas back in the garden, is because Douglas Chandor had put them here. And they were obviously one of his favorite plants because he put so many of them in here.
So what about the intermediate shade trees that you're using? We see, of course, a lot of Japanese maples. Those are just wonderful for the shade garden.
Absolutely. You know, the one behind us here is Bloodgood, and that one stays a little bit red tinted through the summer. In more sun, like up in Oregon or something, you can get deep, dense reds on that, but here in Texas, it'll bleach out a little bit. Japanese maples, that standard one behind us there is excellent. We also use plants that, if we get areas where we have a little bit of sun, bridal wreath has become one of the favorites here. And, you know, of course, our encores that peek into the sun actually flower a little better for us here.
Yeah.
And as I just look around, we have a Pindo palm here, which is, I don't know if you'd consider that a shrub or what, more of an accent plant.
Right.
Japanese boxwood works very well for us through the garden. It's a good transition plant from sunny areas to shade, adapts very well to shade. And quite honestly, every once in a while you lose a tree limb or something, so you want plants that can take a little bit of adaptation to them. Yaupon holly, especially the dwarf yaupon holly, works well for a little hedge and such around here. The only thing I don't like about it, it's a little brittle, and if a kid steps on it, it's kind of over, you know. Right. So, but at least a boxwood will give you a little leeway on that.
Certainly one of the most important features of this garden are the many water features, most of which are connected, and it looks like they seem to originate from this giant waterfall right here.
Absolutely. Well, this is Cox's Mountain, and while it's not the origin of all the water features, it does look like it. It's about 19 feet tall. It was built of enormous sandstone boulders that were actually imported from just west of here in Palo Pinto County. And it was kind of an amazing thing, the process of building this. They used very crude materials. They had a 2-ton truck with a A-frame, built a 3-inch pipe and a winch on it. And you know, like, I've been to enough stone yards, that's probably a 6-ton boulder there. And
easily.
Yeah. That may not have been able to do anything but throw it off the truck and land it there. So all our fountains are recirculating water.
Okay.
And they range from this being the biggest to the small falls. We have a lot of ponds in here, and they're all filled with well water, and all have recirculating pumps because there's no natural streams or anything here.
It's amazing just the amount of, you know, coolness that we get from the water. You do get the sense of tranquility. I think a lot of it's in the sound of the water, but then also there's a sense of, you know, just flowing through the garden with all these little rivers and creeks and ponds. It's wonderful.
Well, you know, you've touched on something that's quite amazing. I work here day in and day out, and so the fountains are on when I'm working during the day, and when I turn them off at night, it's kind of interesting that the silence is the odd part.
Right.
here that it's kind of an unusual thing. So, but yeah, obviously the white noise created by all the fountains drowns out a lot of noises around from the neighborhoods around here.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You want to go see some other fountains?
Sure.
Let's do it. Eric, this is what we call the Small Falls, and it's a miniaturized version of a waterfall. It's not quite as grand as Cox's Mountain, but probably a little more in scale with what some people could do. We've taken that stone wall and softened it with Ficus pumila, or creeping fig. We've continued the azalea theme in here, over here, with a little Japanese maple in there too, but we stuck some sago palms in here for a little drama to give it, so we're trying to give it kind of a little a distinct feel, because to make it different from its big brother over there who gets all the attention. We crossed the water here with millstones, and 3 of them are actual millstones, and one of them's a recreated millstone, because I guess he ran out, which is kind of cool, but it's an example of upcycling back then. As actually is the structure behind us. It's a 7-sided gazebo made out of some Leyland cypress wood we had left over, so that was kind of fun. But in here, I think the inclusion of all the elements adds a very distinctive feel to it. We actually have a ceiling over this formed by this eastern red cedar here. And this is the start of the canal system you were talking about before, and actually goes about 200 feet that way. Wow. And along the way, we have various little aquatic plants. This is a soft rush over here, which is actually in full flower. It's kind of nice. Yeah. Native plant. And we have some edging done in local petrified wood, which is kind of nice. And anyway, it's kind of nice. This was actually built as a floor to the garden. So Chandor found out where he wanted the canals and the water features and laid the bottom from them, built the edges up, and then added soil between them because he knew he wanted to grow an exuberant garden, and so he needed soil to do that, and lots of it. So that's kind of how the garden got built. It was built up. Instead of excavating down, it was built up from the ground.
That's beautifully done. I think, Stephen, some of the most successful man-made water features are the ones that very realistically mimic nature. And one thing I love about this feature is it reminds me of those little springs that you see in the mountains where the water is just tumbling down the rocks and creates that sense of coolness and that sense of relaxation. So well done in this garden.
Absolutely. This is a favorite little area of mine.
Well, let's go take a look at some water features that might be more practical for homeowners to put in. You know, we wouldn't likely install something like this, but let's go look at what we can do in our own backyards.
Sounds great.
Some of my favorite water features in this garden, Stephen, are the little whimsical ones that you find as you walk around the corner of a path, and many of them, in fact, have a very different. They give you a different sound than the larger ones. And in fact, there's a really neat one around the corner where it's a little spurt of water that's going into like a large open pipe in it, and it has like a kind of a low, hollow, rumbling sound, which is super neat. And of course, we've got little fountains like this. This is, we were talking about some ideas that might be practical for homeowners, and I think this is a great example, just a ceramic pot that's water's gurgling through.
Absolutely. This is recent. This was put in last year. We came up with this urn, and it's a very popular idea, and I love the idea. Anybody can do it. I mean, quite honestly, you can go to the store, come back, and be in a recirculating urn business in an hour. Anyway, so it did give it an unusual look, and we'll actually soften this up with some ferns here a little later in the summer. But it's a real simple fountain, quick and easy, and it works, and it's sweet.
The hardscape in this garden is obviously something that's very important, as well as something that Douglas clearly cared a lot about, and it dictates the way that the visitor experiences the garden. So you're kind of forced down certain paths, and it sets up these amazing vistas.
We're actually on one of the axes of the garden that goes all the way across the garden, and this one ends in a grotto on either end. The other one is the driveway that cuts up all the way to Cox's Mountain. But it's an amazing thing, the detail that was paid attention to, and you don't really notice it at first because it's so natural, and plus we've softened the edges like with Liriope here, and that little drift of English ivy going down, I'm going to leave that. That just adds a softness to the garden. So actually the hardscape of the garden is very rigidly laid out, the patterns and the squareness and everything, and then we soften it with plants. And so that's kind of how we get at that naturalistic feel.
What are some of the materials that have been used for the paths?
Well, this is a regular flagstone here, and you see, and flagstone varies wherever you are in the country, the local material, and this happens to be some sandstone here that's available locally. And we have some limestone here is this edging, and also the brickwork. A lot of the bricks are from the Thurber Brick Factory, which is about 35 miles west of here, and operated between 1898 and 1933, so it was regionally and time appropriate to include in this garden, and this garden does have a lot of Thurber brick already in it, so we try and find that when we build another pathway.
Yeah. You know, one thing you mentioned earlier I think is particularly nice here is that oftentimes when paths are added to a garden, or you have other kinds of hardscape walls, etc., it does add a certain degree of formality that can sometimes feel rigid, but the use of all the flowing plants and the ways that it does a tremendous job of softening this hardscape. It's great.
It does, and you know, there's a few leaves here and there, and that's okay. It kind of adds, it tells you where you are, and it lends a little seasonality to it. So I don't worry about making sure the paths are scrubbed clean. Obviously, when we blow the pathways, we blow the pathways, but we don't worry about keeping them just real sterile or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's another interesting path up here. You want to see this?
Sure.
It's the V path.
All of these wonderful paths that we've been looking at, Stephen, converge on many little garden rooms, if you will. And this is one of the most magnificent garden rooms here, and we just feel like we're in this really, really private space. And of course, there's a tremendous change in elevation. I'm assuming this was a hand-dug feature?
Well, it was hand-dug with dynamite, is what it was. Back in the day when you could buy dynamite down at the hardware store.
Oh, we missed those days.
Yeah, so this was actually excavated and blown out there, and it was kind of it's an amazing thing. What you're talking about is this is where you're probably the most immersed in the garden. You have a canopy of trees almost all the way over. You're in a pit, so the earth itself is dug out. The fountain, which we don't have on, so we can hear each other talk right now, but the sound, so everything's coming at you from all different directions. And you know, the bulbs have faded a little bit, but I kind of get the same feeling when I'm over at Dallas Blooms in springtime, because just the immersion in the color over there, and they don't have quite the defined feel of this garden, but boy, they do it with color, and you just kind of lose yourself in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact too that we're surrounded by these walls, and there's a lushness, almost a tropical type feel, although there really aren't any tropical plants in this planting, but it's just a really deep sense of peace and calm that you feel in the sunken garden.
Absolutely. The wall is now covered with English ivy that's very happy. That's why it looks so lush and green. Yeah. But anyway, there's a dry stack stone wall over there, and we'll actually shear the English ivy off of it once a year, just to allow the new growth, the lush growth, to come out, and that's kind of what gives it an amazing characteristic right there.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of formal elements here as well. You know, with your holly borders and then the structure with trees in all four corners. Really nice.
Our hollies are spectacular, but my little favorite here is the feel of this fresh growth on this Japanese boxwood here, and I've used that around this garden to, I think, good effect.
Absolutely.
Ready to hear this fountain?
Let's turn it on.
All right. Heart of the Silver Garden here at Chandor Gardens. It's an amazing place. It's very symmetrically laid out, very hard elements in here, but softened by plant materials once again. The heart of the garden is this little armillary fountain behind you. There's actually another concentric ring behind it, which is the heart of which is the cedar elm. And around the border is this curved pergola, which really is an amazing structure, kind of a trademark for the garden. Yeah. The hardscape elements in here are so well crafted that it kind of fools you into thinking this is a symmetrical garden, even though it's far from that. So the quadrants of grass appeared to be the same initially, but they're very different. And it's called the silver garden because it was originally plants with gray, silver, and blue hues to them. And we're actually kind of moonlit in the summer, and so it kind of gave a silver sheen to it. So, and this garden was primarily a summer garden at the time, and they had what they called fries back here. Nowadays we call them chicken or barbecue or whatever. They call them chicken roasts or chicken fries back then. So.
Nice. Well, it looks like it'd be a wonderful place to entertain. It's right off the house, and you have these, like you said, these nice little formal quadrants, and these are wider paths than some of the other paths, so it could accommodate more people.
Absolutely. We put tables and chairs all over it and decorations, and pow, it turns into a party.
One very important thing to remember about good garden design is that this is space that is ultimately designed to be lived in. The garden becomes
Absolutely.
an extension of the house, and so I think it's really neat to see the way that these different garden rooms have been used. And of course, this would have been a small recreational field.
Absolutely. This is the bowling green. It's 17 feet wide, 100 feet long, almost the official size of 100 by or 120 by 20, but close enough. And it was the only piece of turf that Douglas Chandor cultured, so was in here, and certainly for bocce ball, and we still see people today playing bocce ball in here.
It seems like you'd have some challenges trying to grow grass in such a transitional area. We're standing in the only little piece of full sun right here. You've got shade on both ends.
It's full sun all day long, half day sun, and 0% sun over there. So you get deep shade to full sun, and we're trying to make it all look the same so it'll be aesthetically pleasing. So we actually have 3 different kinds of grass in here. We have St. Augustine, Bermuda grass, both of which are very common, and then the tall fescue. And tall fescue requires a little more juice in the summertime, but you can eke it through if you try.
I really love the way the space is designed. So if you were playing sports out here, the observers would be on a completely different level. He's got these really nice stacked stone walls around it, and actually little gutters. So I guess if you rolled your ball too far,
yeah, it'd go in there. Not much bocce ball going on here. Mostly this is for weddings. We have aisles of chairs down either side, and a center aisle here where they walk up, and the bride and groom get married right in front of the fountain there. So it's a very nice thing. Actually, it's a Chandor tradition. We have the fountain off during the ceremony, so you can hear a little better, and then we turn the fountain on when the bride and groom kiss, and the whole audience goes, "Aw!" And it happens every time. So this is home of the Aw Garden.
It's magic.
Yeah. Eric, we're here in the heart of the boxwood garden. I love it. There's boxwoods all around the front. We have a 11-foot tall artist's window here that faces directly north. That was kind of the genesis of the whole property here. He sided the window and then built the studio around that, the house around that, and then the garden around that. So it was kind of a concentric ring effect that happened. A lot of neat features in here. It's brick sidewalk made into a brick pattern. This very elegant bronze nude sculpture, which I think is just fantastic. It sits atop a really interesting fountain too that's actually made of a repurposed tractor transmission case and front wheel assembly, and just dressed up with some custom brickwork. So there's a lot going on in this space. It seems complicated, but actually it's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think it's a great lesson that we learned from some of these garden rooms, and especially this one. This space, it could be anyone's patio, it could be anyone's front entrance, and to do something like this would not require much of any specific knowledge about plants. It's just a very simple design laid out with just a few repeated elements. And I think it's interesting what has been done with the brickwork here. It can be tempting just to do just a very straight linear path, but there's something so interesting about making a pattern. We've got a fish pattern over here, and these nice little kind of brick, raised bed edges that are not just a straight line, so it's just very simple yet elegant elements that make a small area like this fantastic.
And on the bonuses, it's easy to maintain too. There's very little maintenance happening in this garden.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for sharing today. I really feel like we've learned a tremendous amount from you, and what a wonderful place.
Likewise, thank you. All right, peace and love.
Another show, another amazing garden. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we've enjoyed producing it. If you watch the show, we travel the country visiting beautiful gardens. Well, We have a surprise in store for several in the audience. To learn more about the surprise, visit our website at GardenSMART.com.
The Safer brand organic lawn care program makes house calls. By ordering online, the lawn you want can be delivered right to your door. The Safer brand organic lawn care program is a proud sponsor of public television and GardenSMART.
I should be arrested for crimes against potted plant kind. My house is where plants came to die.
Miracle-Gro potting mix is designed to help grow big, beautiful plants. Everyone grows with Miracle-Gro.
Hey there, little Red Riding Hood. You sure are looking good.
Today we visit a shade garden that's done a masterful job of creating warm, intimate spaces, as well as picking up some great tips on how we can apply those design principles to our own gardens. If you have questions about anything you've seen today, visit us on the web at GardenSMART.com. And remember, even if you're a master gardener, there's always more to learn. So join us next week for more great gardening tips and ideas as we garden smart.